Going back to Harbaugh, as you've no doubt seen or heard, President Bush had a shoe hurled at him yesterday, actually 2 shoes on his visit to Iraq. What's been the reaction in the Arab world to that incident? What's the significance of throwing a shoe? A pair of them, actually. And what, if anything, does this incident say about how Iraqis view the war that's cost us Americans over 4,000 lives? Joining us, Raghida Dergham right now. She's a columnist for Al Hayat, the leading independent Arabic newspaper. She's also an MSNBC contributor. And Rajiv Chandrasekaran, former Baghdad bureau chief for the Washington Post and currently the newspaper's national editor. Very much, Raghida, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rajiv. I want to get a sense from you, Raghida. What did you think, as a person who knows that world in the Middle East, about that incident when you first saw the pictures?
Well, as a journalist, I was quite offended. I thought it was a despicable act for any journalist to use their profession in order to get away with a political message, whatever it may be. I think we normally raise pens, we raise voices, we do not raise shoes against leaders. So I was dismayed. I thought it was despicable, and I was embarrassed. Now, of course, the Arab world is divided in its own interpretation of this act. Some find it an insult to insult visitors, especially heads of state, so it is against the hospitality of Arabs, and others feel that the policies of President Bush deserved that he receives such an insult. And of course, throwing a shoe in the Arab world is really a very deep insult. On top of it, using the word dog.
Yeah, let me go to Rajiv. Do you agree with that? The throwing of the shoe has some sort of Eastern significance we may not be aware of. Besides, you know, if your father got mad at you back 30 or 40 years ago, he might have done it. I don't know. Yes. But apparently it does mean something far more harsher. What do you make of it, Rajiv?
Indeed. I mean, this is a grave insult. You know, there are all sorts of kind of analogs, I suppose, in the Western world that one couldn't either utter or perform on air for risk of getting you an FCC fine, Chris. But this is the sort of thing that is a real expression of deep-seated anger. It meant to be a real insult, and with a clear and unambiguous message to all of the Iraqis watching on television, people across the Arab world. And I think that's part of the reason why we see the reaction that we do on the Arab street in Baghdad and in other capitals in the Middle East today, because of this sort of extreme reaction, this extreme insult that the journalist delivered toward the U.S. president yesterday.
Well, you know, Rajiv and Raghida, you know, both of you know that from our culture, we sort of like the way the president was nimble enough to duck it and not go hiding behind the podium there. He had his head popping up right 2 seconds later, taking the other shoe. He dodged that even better. He dodged that with his hand. This guy has no physical cowardice at all. He wasn't afraid of that guy throwing the shoe one bit. I was impressed by that. I want to ask you, is your sense it's 60-40 supporting this guy in the Arab world right now, Raghida, or 40-60? Which way is the Arab street applauding or dismayed by this event in our TV screens here?
Probably the street is probably 60 for it, because they are very angry with American politics altogether. They're angry with President George W. Bush, not only because of the invasion of Iraq, but also because of his policies towards the Palestinians and in his embrace of Israel. But I think the elite, the intellectuals are quite divided. There would be 50-50. Look also who is making a hero out of the journalists. The state-run or the state-owned television in Syria has been making him a hero all day. He got an award from the daughter of al-Qaddafi, the leader of Libya. The Hezbollahs of the world, they have been embracing this journalist, saying, thank you, you expressed our emotions. So this is the sort of divide you will see. The professionals, those who really object to this act of expressing yourself, are quite angry at such an embrace of this man and making him a hero. And the others are saying, well, you know what? Look, the Americans put Saddam Hussein in the hole, and they insulted a president, and therefore they deserve it. But it's very different shades of criticism for the American policies. The Iraqis are divided. Probably most of the Iraqis say, thank you, America. And I was just in Bahrain and at a conference on security in Manama, and General Petraeus was speaking, and he was taking questions, and the expressions were, thank you, General Petraeus, because you have stopped this, the civic and the sectarian fighting in Iraq. So that is the sort of divide you have in Iraq.
Well, I think, Chris, what we're seeing a little bit of is actually a sectarian reaction, or at least dividing along sectarian lines in Iraq, where a number of Shiites have been the ones taking to the streets in support of this television journalist who happens to be a Shiite, and that you're seeing some expressions of dismay from some quarters of the Sunni community. And I think what that gets to is the fact that the Sunnis have been principal beneficiaries of the troop surge, and they find themselves in a much more potentially secure position today than they did some years ago, whereas there are Shiites, particularly supporters of Muqtada al-Sadr, who were principal losers through the troop surge, and you see some expressions of anger and frustration on their part on the streets today.
But Rajiv,
what is it in the Arab world where there's so many people available for demonstrations on a weekday? I mean, let me go to Rajiv. These guys all always look like they got about a 2-day growth of beard. They're always available for demonstration, and they're always yelling in the same passionate way. Are they like always ready, sitting on benches, ready to hit the streets with attitude? I mean, I'm kidding, but it is to us a cartoon. They put a shoe at the top of that flagpole. We laugh at this. I mean, you want to know our Western attitudes? This is a joke. You guys are sitting around all day with nothing to do, drinking sweet tea, waiting for something to happen. I mean, why don't they work, or why don't they do something?
It speaks to the dire unemployment in the Arab
maybe
world.
That's a statement. That's the real statement here.
There's real joblessness in places like Iraq and across the Middle East. And you're looking at...
Why don't they blame their bozo leaders, the guys in Syria, the Assad family that's been ruling that family like a potentate for years, those years. Why don't they hold it against their zero leaders? Why are they blaming our flag for their unemployment and their availability? Look at them. They're dancing over a shoe.
To your point, Chris, it's also look at where these demonstrations are taking place in the Sadr city. This is Muqtada Sadr, you know, and this is not a reflection of where all. It's not only the Shia. I don't mean only that they are Shiites. I do not mean to say that. I mean to say the Muqtada Sadr group, who happen to be Shiites, are against the government, which is a Shiite government. So it is not all Shiites.
We put it in power. I mean, we got to know.
Exactly. And that is why, you're right, we put it in power, and this war was really for the benefit of the Shiites in Iraq. So it is not, you know, I mean, and the benefit for Iran. And so it's not really an anti-Shiite war. To the contrary, the benefactor has been Iran. But to your point of these demonstrators and just readily burning American flags, they are normally bussed, and they are normally, you know, encouraged by the rulers or the leaders of sects in order to deliver a message to the United States of America.
It's very easy to whip up a protest.
I don't want to be too jingoist here, but I do think that the availability of anger, the availability of attitude in the streets over this, where there was a rebuke of an American president in what we would consider an absurd way. I mean, obviously he can get away with this. He'll suffer a little punishment for this. But you know, we wonder, we've lost 4,000 people over there in that war. To bring stability to that country. 30,000 wounded in various degrees, some of them horribly maimed for life. And here's a guy that can't find the words to express his criticism of our policy. He can only speak with his shoes.
It's an act of cowardice.
Why can't he say something?
It is an act of cowardice, and no more than that. It is really this sort of act tells you that there is a lot of impotence and there's a lot of bankruptcy in the anger, in the Arab anger. So therefore, it's not really reflective of all Arabs. A lot of Arabs are angry with that point, as was made by this irresponsible and despicable journalist.
By the way, we've been through this with Khrushchev banging his shoe in the UN, and it's just, it doesn't impress, the American people are not turned on by this. Anyway, thank you, Raghida Dergham. Thank you, Rajiv Shanasakar of the Washington Post. Up next, Carol.